Hey there, I'm Paula. This is How to Make Dinner, and today we're making a really friggin' awesome mushroom risotto, and it's super easy, and you don't need an Instant Pot, and you don't need to stir it for 20 minutes straight. The reason I'm making this is because my friend foraged and found a bunch of wild mushrooms. So I have to just take advantage of that. So these are dried porcini mushrooms that were collected from the woods around where we live. And this is just like an amazing treat. I've never seen dried mushrooms like this in the store. When you don't have access to these beautiful, freshly foraged mushrooms, you can buy the ones in the little baggies. Most grocery stores have them now. They're usually like in a little baggie on the end of the aisle, and you can get dried porcinis or chanterelles, or if you're at an Asian grocery store, you can buy dried shiitakes, which are pretty cheap. The porcinis and stuff are a bit more expensive. So if I were doing that, I would just say use one bag, one of the little baggies for this recipe. So I'm gonna take this dried porcini and just chop it roughly. And I'm going to soak it in some boiling water. And then that same boiling water is going to be the stock that we use for the risotto. And if you don't have dried mushrooms, you can totally skip this. You can use chicken broth or you can use beef broth. That'd be really nice. But I'm really excited about celebrating these shrooms. So I'm putting the mushrooms in the bottom of a 1 liter container and then topping it up to the 1 liter mark with boiling water. If I boiled that much, yeah, it looks pretty good. And then we're just gonna let those soak while we get on with everything else. I've got my Dutch oven over medium heat, and I'm going to put a little olive oil in there. Look at the size of this jug. We're going through it pretty fast though. We go through a lot of olive oil in this house. About a tablespoon of olive oil. That's not it for the fat. We're gonna add more butter and stuff later. So, while the olive oil is heating, I'm going to chop up an onion. I like to chop onion pretty finely for this risotto just because I kind of like it when the little bits of onion are kind of unrecognizable from the rice. So my goal is to try and cut the onion as finely as grains of rice. I've never heard anyone talk about that before. I think, and I've never heard myself talk about it. I feel like that's just what I've been doing. Like in my mind without actually vocalizing it or realizing it. You know, making these videos, it's like shining a mirror onto yourself. It's kind of weird. I have an onion dicing tutorial video as well if you are a beginner with the old knife skills. So the onions are going in. As I almost always do, I'm gonna put about a teaspoon of salt in right at the beginning because I'm fairly certain that it's gonna need it. And the salt is going to help draw some of the juices out of the onions. While that's going, I'm going to crush a couple of cloves of garlic. 2 to be exact. So this is like the most labor-intensive part, definitely getting it going. But the thing is, you do all this stuff when you're doing it, when you're doing Instant Pot risotto as well. So it's kind of like, sometimes I feel like the Instant Pot doesn't save that much in actual effort. Like waiting for something to cook doesn't take that much effort. I actually love it. I love sitting around and waiting for things to cook. You know, with a glass of wine and a good chit chat with my loved one or a good friend. Okay, so that's like chopped, but it's not super fine. It's just fine the way it is, all right? Okay, so onions and garlic and salt. Next in, I'm going to go in with some mushrooms. So this is like, this is actually a wild mushroom risotto because of the porcinis that my buddy found. Shout out to Tristan for that contribution. And I also have some chanterelles, which he also foraged. So I feel pretty spoiled in the mushroom department these days. This is a luxury, and I'm well aware of that. So I do have some button mushrooms as well, so just some criminis actually, to bulk up the mushroom kind of quotient. So that's going in. And I don't slice the chanterelles. I actually and I don't wash any mushrooms ever. I just kind of like visually inspect them for like pine needles and dirt. And then I just tear them. I love the kind of natural vibe of just torn wild mushrooms. So this is about 250 grams of mushrooms total going in now. And then I have another little bit that I've set aside just of the chanterelles. I'm gonna fry those after and use them as a bit of a garnish. So all we do now is cook these for about 2 minutes until they kind of start to give up some of their juice. Meanwhile, I'm gonna get the rice ready. So this is Carnaroli rice. So it's a risotto rice. Usually risotto is made with any of two different varieties. It's Carnaroli, which is this one, or arborio, which is kind of more common, but I think this one's a bit fancier. And my favorite thing about this rice is that it arrives in this vac-packed like brick. And I love opening it and hearing the air go into it. So let's see. Oh, did you hear that? So after about 2 minutes, the mushrooms are starting to kind of give off their juice and kind of shrink down a bit. So I'm gonna put the rice in. And the idea here is that the rice gets a bit of a head start on all the flavors that are happening in the pan. So like the onion, the garlic, the mushrooms, they're kind of like impregnating the grains of rice with that amazing flavor. And I just kind of toss them around for a minute or two at this stage. And then my favorite part comes up, which is adding wine. I love cooking with wine. It's so, I don't know, just the wafting smell of wine that comes up is just like, it's just heavenly. So I don't normally measure, but I'm gonna measure a cup right now. So equal parts rice to wine. And then you'll hear the sizzle. I love it. And that's gonna help to pull up all the brown bits on the bottom of the pan that have been forming from the onions and mushrooms. Once the wine starts to kind of reduce a little bit, maybe after about 2 minutes, I'm just gonna start adding the mushroom stock that we made. And the porcinis that are floating in it are really nice and soft now because it's been about 10 minutes. And so they're also gonna go in with the stock. The only thing you have to be careful of is sometimes there's a little bit of dirt that comes from these mushrooms, and that the dirt will sink to the bottom. So I usually don't pour in like the very, very bottom bit of this. This is really hot, so I'm gonna get a towel. And the reason I think this risotto is a bit easier than others is because I don't add it like little bit by little bit. I actually add like big bit by big bit. So you don't really have to be babysitting it as much as a lot of people seem to think. So I'm gonna add like a third of this broth. It's maybe more like half to a third. And give it a little stir. And now where most recipes would say you have to stand here and stir, I'm gonna say keep it on like a medium low and put the lid on and walk away for about 5 minutes. All right, so it's been about 6 minutes or so, and that first round of mushroom stock has been totally absorbed into the rice. And as you can see, I haven't been stirring it at all. It's been sitting with the lid closed for that whole time, and it's super creamy. Like, you don't need to stir to make it creamy. It's just creamy because that's the nature of the rice. The short grain arborio or Carnaroli rice is really starchy, so when you cook it and stir it even just a little bit, it starts to release those starches and it gets really creamy. So once that first round has absorbed, I'm going to dump in the second round of stock, leaving the last little bit at the bottom in case there's any dirt or bits of, I don't know, anything. Just leave that behind. And we're probably still going to adjust it a little bit with water at the end. That's totally expected. But this should be, so the first round was about 6 minutes. This round should be about another 6 minutes with the lid on. And then we'll just do our final adjustments. So we'll see you in another 6. Oh, one more thing. I like to drop a branch of fresh thyme in there, or rosemary, just for a little extra herby fall flavor business. 3 sprigs, 3 little branches of thyme. So all the broth is now absorbed into the rice, and it looks really, really creamy. And if I just take a tiny little bite, it's like almost perfectly cooked. It's kind of got a tiny bit of firmness left in it, but that's what I want because I'm about to give it one last step before I call it done, and that is to add some butter. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of butter right in. And I'm going to grate some Parmesan cheese into it as well. This is like kind of just however much you want. I love cheese, but I don't have a ton here. Probably like, I don't know, a handful of Parm. You could add other cheese here too. If you are into blue cheese, you could definitely make this a blue cheese and mushroom risotto. I find that's a little bit strong for the chanterelles though, because they've kind of got like a delicate flavor and texture. So this much Parm, I'm just gonna scrape it in and give it a little preliminary stir. And now I'm just gonna leave this off the heat and let it kind of just sit for like 5 minutes on its own. This is something that I picked up from Jamie Oliver years and years ago, to just let the last few minutes of cooking happen just on its own. No heat required. Just keep the lid on and let everything let everything kind of come together at the end. So for an added little bonus, I'm going to make a little topping with some chanterelles and a few sage leaves. So this is kind of a fun optional extra. I like having a little bit of a fancy garnish on risotto, and it's nice to have a couple of different textures going on too. So the way that these mushrooms are going to taste are going to be different from the ones that are in there. The ones that are in there are very like soft. They've almost just become one with the rice, whereas these ones are going to have that like buttery kind of vibe. So get rid of this. Just put this here, and I'll use this, I guess. So again, over medium, this time it's going to be medium-high heat. I'm going to put these chanterelle mushrooms into this cast iron pan with no fat at all, just dry, because they've got a lot of moisture in them. Even though I didn't wash them, they just have moisture, and if you just put them in dry, it just kind of helps to, just makes them good. No explanations needed. So medium-high heat, and we're almost toasting them. So once they get a little bit of a toasty, charred kind of thing going on, you can just add a little bit of butter and olive oil. This is because the pan is pretty hot and I don't want the butter to burn. So a little splash of olive oil first. Oh, that was a big splash. I'm okay with it. And a little bit of butter. And the sage leaves. Make sure they make good contact with that fat and they'll kind of get a little bit frazzled. Oh yeah, look at those sage leaves. These are done. Turn this off. I'm really glad we unplugged the fire alarm here. Let's see what we have here. Oh yeah. So this is so creamy. So I don't think this takes too much longer than doing it in the Instant Pot. I feel like Instant Pot risotto, you have to set it for 6 minutes and then there's a time it takes to heat up and build up the pressure. So that's probably another 10. This took like 25 maybe overall. And look how creamy it is. Like I don't want it any creamier than that. That's pretty perfect to me. Oh yeah. Oh, a little crack of pepper. I want that. And then I'm just gonna plate it up for myself. Just a little snack. There we go. And then throw some of these bits on top. Nothing too fancy, you know. Don't want to mess around too much. But a little bit of messing around is kind of fun sometimes. And you can put more cheese on if you want. That's totally up to you. But that's it. That's the mushroom risotto. And I'm pretty excited about it. And it's delicious. So I won't eat any more. Thanks so much for joining me today to make this mushroom risotto. I hope you love it. I hope you make it often. It's really just a total winner and you can't go wrong. And I'll be back with another easy dinner pretty soon.